As many players expect more information to drop regarding the latest Monster Hunter game or Generation 6 during this upcoming Tokyo Game Show in September, many others are looking to fill in that void and play something Monster Hunter adjacent, or at the very least, a game that resembles Monster Hunter. And today I wanted to talk about one of those very specific games in Project Awakening that, in fact, when it was originally revealed all the way back in 2018, or maybe even earlier when it was originally talked about by Side Games in November of 2016, Monster Hunter was directly referenced alongside Dragon's Dogma. So not only do I want to talk about what's happening with this game, how come we haven't heard anything, and more importantly, how come we're not able to play it since the original reveal trailer that we got to see and the teasers since then have been very promising, but it's been a long time coming. So first and foremost, originally it was revealed back at Side Games' next event in November of 2016. It was originally revealed as a PlayStation 4 game, and the developments were officially called a high-end console game. So Side Games, originally when they started to work on this title, they were not only looking into pretty much making something completely different and completely interesting, but more importantly, they were going to develop a brand new game engine for it called the Callista Game Engine, which we're going to be talking about later in this video. Since then, heading into E3 of 2018, there was a small gameplay trailer, or a small kind of like cutscene, which is the one that you're seeing right there. And as the developers decided to provide more information, this is when they originally mentioned that the game was going to be a Monster Hunter-like or Dragon Dogma adjacent type title. It was originally referenced to be a fantasy RPG back in September of 2018. This was after their E3 presentation. This might have been around Gamescom time in that given year. They confirmed that it was a PS4 game, and Junji Tago was the original director, Ryosuke Aiba was the art director, and Kenjichiro Takaki was the original producer for the game, someone that has worked in many high-profile Japanese titles in many years. As you would have expected, it was going to be, or it is going to be, if you're still believing that this is going to launch, and this is where things get really interesting, as an open title game with some core RPG elements, focusing more on combat and enemy engagements, specifically with monsters and big monsters at that, breakable parts, different varied type weapons, and many combo options. Unlike different traditional high fantasy RPGs that had released since then, they were looking for more methodical game experiences, is what they originally said, and a more intricate you versus the monster type sets of environments. So they were basically trying to do, or at the very least, the original notion of this game was trying to do very much what Monster Hunter was trying to do, with a little bit of Dragon Dogma thrown in there. Since then, Side Games held a different presentation at a different event heading into 2020, and they spoke about the director, specifically Takaki, discussed the possibility of this potentially becoming a PlayStation 5 title if the development extended into next generation consoles. Once again, this was in 2020. Then earlier in the year, in August of 2019, a demo version was originally registered with the European PEGI board's rating there, where essentially they were going to release a demo for all the masses to be able to check out. But of course, that never happened. So that leads us pretty much to where we are today with this game. Whereas about a year ago, Side Games decided to take to their social media pages and basically confirm that they had been working on the Callista game engine for current gen consoles, current gen being PlayStation 5, Series X, Series S, and PC. About a year ago or so, they put out a Side Games Tech Conference video in which they did about an entire breakdown of how it is that they were going to be able to kind of not just develop future titles with this game engine in mind, but also Project Awakening. Specifically, this game is going to be the kind of like driving factor of this technology. Since then, they showcase like terraforming videos, how they were going to be working on like creating the game world, how they were going to be working with characters, rendering features, assets, developing and loading, all of those kind of things. But since then, not pretty much has been seen. Actually, in that video that they showcased, we should be seeing some clips overlaid there. They never actually showcased any combat, any gameplay, or anything along those lines. Certainly, they didn't even bother to showcase a monster or anything. Again, a lot of asset rendering, a lot of terraforming and maps, but they didn't really talk about any of the monsters or anything along those lines, combat, weapons, or anything. So a lot of information has kind of been hard to come by for many years. Since those early 2018, 2019 time periods, especially if you take a closer look at the Project Awakening page, you still see a PS4 coming to PS4 from Side Games header, but they don't really mention anything else. Certainly not the fact that the game could be now being worked on PlayStation 5. And that leads us to now. There have been many rumors since then, especially in the past couple of weeks, where people are kind of starting to suggest, and a lot of this is coming out of China, suggesting that there might be a completely full reintroduction of the game as a PlayStation 5 title. Of course, no longer being called Project Awakening, but being called something completely different. Of course, usually when you see games being called a project something, that is just a development title. It doesn't really mean anything. So if we are to see something, whether it is at Gamescom, whether it is more specifically at Tokyo Game Show later this year, or maybe even at the Game Awards heading into the end of the year, we should probably be very well pleased that Project Awakening is being fully reintroduced. And we have a little bit of a track record as of late that we have been seeing Side Games do a lot of things, specifically with games that they had been working on in the past, things that maybe didn't necessarily work out for them all that well, and they're kind of trying to reintroduce them now as a brand new repackaged experience. And that's actually in direct reference to Grand Blue Fantasy, both versus Rising and the original Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Grand Blue Fantasy versus, originally the fighting game that was, I believe, released around 2020 or so. I believe it might have been the pandemic year. It didn't necessarily do all that well because of many online issues that the game originally had. Since then, it's completely being reworked combat-wise. Rollback is being introduced. Many new characters are being added, and they're going to be releasing it, in November of later this year. PlayStation, I believe, and PC as well. PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC. Meanwhile, games that we have known long ago, like Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I believe the very first times that we heard about this game might have been around that same time when we heard about Project Awakening back in 2016. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink was also originally to be a PlayStation 4 game. But since then, a lot of development hell, if you will, if you want to consider it that way. The game has been, going through many changes. And we now know that it's slated to be a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and Windows game. Still, they say 2023, late 2023, but it's, of course, looking more like 2024 at the end of the day. But more interestingly enough, as of the past few months, they have been releasing more and more actual gameplay of the game. So we do get to see that the developers have been working hard on this. And I think this kind of falls back into what Side Games, and specifically Side Games of Osaka, has been dealing with. The developer, where essentially since the COVID years, they have been struggling to put out games. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, for example, struggled originally at launch, not necessarily because it was a bad game, but because there were many features that were just simply not there, or they were missing. So it's not that much of a surprise that Grand Blue Fantasy Relink has been pretty much delayed for many years. And then that leads us to Project Awakening. Still, all these years later, we're hoping to hear more information, because as Monster Hunter players, we want to have more game experiences. Sure, Monster Hunter might be the peak of these type of games, but certainly other developers taking a crack at it, or trying to develop some new mechanics, or at the very least the core gameplay to be similar, is something that we want to see. And Project Awakening has been something that certainly caught my eye originally when I heard about it. Something that I saw a lot of people discussing as to whatever happened to that game, specifically when it came to being a similar Monster Hunter experience. And up until it's hopefully reintroduced later this year, for whatever brand new developer name that they're going to provide it with. It will be interesting to see if that original Dragon Dogma and Monster Hunter experience is there at the core of combat. But that's about all the information that I have for you guys today. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.